Good morning, everyone. Hope you're well and things are going okay with you. Reminder: tomorrow night we have our midweek and our conversation with Mpatso. I'm going to be in contact with Mpatso today just to make sure that everything's working all right with her, and hopefully we'll get a chance to chat to her tomorrow night at midweek. The link for that is in the newsletter, and if you don't have that, please do get in touch with me and I'll make sure that you are able to get on to our Zoom meeting tomorrow night at 7:30. We're going to read this morning from Mark chapter 11 and into chapter 12. So let me read it with you. Mark 11 beginning at verse 27. They came again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him, and they said to him, "By what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do them?" Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? Answer me." And they discussed it with one another, saying, "If we say from heaven, he will say, 'Why then did you not believe him?' But shall we say from man?" They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John really was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." And he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a fence around it and dug a pit for the winepress and built a tower and leased it to tenants and went into another country. When the season came, he sent a servant to the tenants to get from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. And they took him, and beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Again he sent to them another servant, and they struck him on the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and him they killed. And so with many others, some they beat, and some they killed. He had still one other, a beloved son. Finally he sent him to them, saying, "They will respect my son." But those tenants said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." They took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the tenants and give the vineyard to others. Have you not read this scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it was marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to arrest him, but they feared the people, for they perceived that he had told the parable against them. So they left him and went away. Here in this passage is the beginning of a battle which is going to take up most of chapter 12. It's the battle between Jesus and the religious leaders. And throughout Mark's Gospel, up until this point, there have been a few skirmishes, if you like, in this particular conflict. But now battle is joined. And the battleground for the whole discussion is Jesus' authority. Where does Jesus get the authority to walk into the temple the day before and overturn the money changers' temples and criticize the temple structures for turning God's house into a den of thieves? Where does he get that authority? In whose name or by what authority does he do this? And you would want to know that if somebody walked into your house and started throwing things around and so on. You would be saying, "Have you got a warrant for this? Have you got the authority to do this?" But they're completely undone on their first attack because Jesus turns things around on them. And they can't give an answer about John and his authority, where he got his authority from. They can't give an answer because on the one hand, they never liked John and they always rejected him and his teaching. But on the other hand, they're afraid of the crowd who loved John and followed him. So they sit firmly on the fence and they refuse to give an answer about John. And so they're not qualified to judge questions of authority if they can't honestly answer that question. They're not qualified to judge Jesus' authority or where it comes from. They're out of touch with their own people, and they're unable to give them leadership on some of the most important questions. The vineyard story that Jesus then goes on to tell shows that this is not a recent phenomenon among this particular generation of religious leaders. The tenants are responsible to their master, and the master's servants are sent to remind them of their responsibility to provide fruit for the master. And when those servants come, they suffer, because all they're doing is reminding the tenants of their responsibility. Eventually the son comes and himself is rejected and killed and thrown out of the vineyard. This parable that Jesus tells is, of course, the sad story of God's ancient people. Time after time after time, God had sent prophets to his people throughout the pages of the Old Testament. And those prophets had been rejected, mistreated, and in some cases killed. And now he sends his son. And the reality is that the same thing will happen. And is happening even as he speaks. The leaders, the religious people, the people who thought they had it, they got it, they understood it, show their lack of understanding of what God has really been about all along. Show their lack of understanding of who he is and what he's doing. Show their lack of care for his desire to reach all nations through the chosen nation of Israel. But there is good news in this story. The good news is that God brings salvation from Jesus' rejection. The fact that Jesus is rejected, the fact that the Son is rejected and killed and thrown out, if you like, of the polite society by dying a criminal's death, the fact that all that happens means that our salvation is won for us. That's the good news. But there's also a warning in this story. The warning is this: are we, you and I, really listening to God? Are we really caring for his people? Really, as leaders, telling them the truth about their sin and their need of salvation? And are we really bearing fruit for him in what we do? Comes back to the question of the fig tree from yesterday. Are we really bearing fruit? Are we really desiring to bear fruit for him as we go forward? That's the question we all need to ask ourselves. And I ask you to think about it prayerfully and carefully in the days ahead. God bless.